Well, welcome back to the Awakening Potential Show, where we dive into stories, tools, and strategies to unlock your extraordinary self. I'm your host, Karen Rudolph, and I'm here to support you in stepping boldly into your sassy confidence, your classy wisdom, and your badassy boldness. And this show is your gateway to creating ripples of transformation in your life, your work, and in the world. And so let's awaken your potential and spark the magic within. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce someone who embodies the journey in their own unique way. Our guest, John Kennedy, is a neuroplastician. I said that right. An executive brain coach. How exciting is that? I can't wait to dive in and hear more about that. After 20 years advising C-level executive in Fortune 100 companies, he was contracted to develop the most powerful mental performance training program on earth. It's the only one of its kind approved by the Special Operations Command and helps high-level performers as well as those suffering from brain trauma. As we dive into the conversation, I know will leave you feeling inspired and ready to take bold actions in your own life. I would highly suggest grabbing a notebook, open your heart, and let's awaken the extraordinary together. Warm welcome, John Kennedy. Thank you for being here and making the time.
Thank you, Karen, so much. It was such a fortuitous meeting we had. I don't know if you want to tell people how it was, but mutual friend Tony Doty invited us to this event in Las Vegas, and I think we sat on the couch there for like an hour just talking, and it was sharing. It was great. Really good way to meet.
Fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tony's really introduced me to some amazing people. And as I shared earlier, like I love an intellectual conversation, and what you're doing just had me so, so enrolled and engaged, because when I started my journey, I started with neuroscience, and I was like, what the heck? It was like a download, and I couldn't get enough information. So I just like delved into it and delved into it. And then quantum physics after that. And I'm thinking, what can I do with all of this information? And then I met you, and it was like, oh, wow, yeah, I got the chills. So what is a neuroplastician?
Well, it's interesting. So that term was actually coined by Norman Doidge in his book, The Brain That Changes Itself, which was really the seminal book in the whole area of understanding neuroplasticity, which is the incredible capability God's given our brains to change from repetition. So everything we do, everything we repeat is actually changing our brains. Everything we think, everything we do, everything we say. And the more we repeat it, the deeper those ruts came into being. And so I actually discovered that back in 2007 when the Marines gave me my contract to develop this program. And we'll probably talk more about it as we get into it, but basically, and there's a few others of us out there. I've met several from his book at different conferences and meetings. And it's basically we're using that power of neuroplasticity, but in a very designed and specific way to make positive changes in the brain. Because our brains change all the time anyway, just from repetition, but be able to control that. And then what I was fortunate to be able to do was to actually make those changes very, very quickly. And so that's what a neuroplastician does. We help people improve their lives by physically changing their brain in the ways that are most beneficial to them.
Love that. So I'm curious, Sean, like going back in time, like, way back in time, I always ask number one, what you played with and what was your interests and, your passions back in the day that led you, what you believe
Yeah.
led you up to where you are today. And how'd you get into that? I mean, does it relate to where you were in the past?
Well, it's interesting. One of my favorite quotes, and I've actually done keynotes at conferences on this, is Steve Jobs' quote. He says, "You can only connect the dots looking backwards." So, and that's such a great question you asked, because all of us would have no idea where we're going to be now from back then. But it probably goes back to, I was fortunate. I grew up in a house in upper state New York, Brewster, New York, that was built in 1719. So big old house, oldest house in the county, and of course, lots of chores for us to do. But we're surrounded by woods, about 200 acres of woods. And what I really like to do I guess you call it relaxation, was to go out in the woods, try to get lost and find my way back. And you learn a lot when you're doing that, right? Surrounded by nature. But then that actually went on, you might call on steroids in high school, because my dad worked for IBM and they sent us all to Japan. So I lived in Tokyo for 5 years. Our family was there, and so I just had my high school reunion in Tokyo a couple months ago. So a shout out to all those awesome guys. But one of the things that, living in a strange city, right, in a strange country, and not a foreign speaking country, I determined to take those same skills and figure out how I could get around Tokyo without getting lost as well. So the wonderful thing about Japan is it's entirely safe. So, we're in high school kids. I would grab a couple of my friends on a Saturday, and the public transportation system is amazing. It still is amazing, incredibly clean and efficient, and people are polite. But we wanted to get lost, so I would take a train line to the end and then a bus to the end and try to get as far outside of Tokyo as you could by lunch. Because in Tokyo, all the Japanese wanted to practice English, which was great, but we wanted to practice Japanese. So we got lost. So no English, no anything. And spent the rest of the day trying to find our way back, which meant we had to learn the language. We had to learn some of the written language as well. And it was always fun. And sometimes we come back in a few hours, and sometimes we come back after midnight, but always. So this lifelong learning of solving problems. And then after that, I went into the restaurant business and transformed into some very great, from some poor restaurants to great restaurants, using the power of process, which was kind of my other area of interest. Deming said, if you can't define what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But process make it more efficient. And that led into consulting. So my consulting work was taking on really large problems for companies like Aon and Motorola and trying to rescue these projects. But for me, it wasn't about all the knowledge behind it. It was actually just, simplifying the problem and making it as efficient answer as possible. And then that's what led to the brain training, because I got this opportunity from the Marine Corps in 2007 to develop this program to improve mental performance. And I was inspired by my brother David, who had just returned from Iraq. And the most critical enemy really are the IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And what I learned from my time invested with the Marines in the initial learning process was intuition, which kept our guys alive. And so I was shaking hands with the base commander at the last day of this event, and I just had this God wink. What if I could solve the problem of inefficiency in the brain the same way I did for operations? And so everything came together. That's when I became aware of Norman Deutsch, the brain that changed itself, and some very interesting research out of MIT that found that a very specific type of stimulation would change your brain immediately, not just in a day or a week or a month, as always, but very fast. So I combine that with an agile consulting approach, basically continuously learning and improving, put those all together for the combat brain training program for the Marine Corps. And the coolest thing about that was I was actually solving two completely, seemingly different problems at the same time. So one, the goal was to improve the ability to survive, right? Improve warfighting going into combat so guys didn't get killed. But at the same time, a big problem, and still is the wounds of war, right? After traumatic events, we have post-traumatic stress, we have concussions, anxiety. And what I found was by making the brain more efficient very quickly, it actually solved both problems. So we had Marines that obviously were performing better in combat, they performed better with their homes, with everything else they were doing, but we accelerated recovery tremendously more effectively with this program as well. And so that's what I've been doing since. So military to SEAL snipers to school kids to people with strokes, dementia, it doesn't really matter. The brain is just such an incredible part of everything we do.
Yeah.
Make it faster and more efficient. It has tremendous improvement capabilities.
I love that. You answered a few of my next questions.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good.
It's
Excited
interesting
about this.
because I knew when I met you, we had a lot in common, and I also grew up in the woods, right?
Okay,
Getting
good.
lost. And I also loved manipulative puzzles as a kid. And instead of those flat puzzles, it was always the manipulative. I was always moving.
Yeah, right.
So today, as a creative problem solver, and in essence, that's what I'm hearing you're doing on a bigger scale, and created this amazing program. I definitely want to hear more about it. I obviously was going to ask if it was for children as well. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so what is the innovative process? Or
Well,
yeah.
innovation is interesting because I mean, I have when I did some speech at Southern Utah University a couple of years ago, they asked me, what have I done? And sometimes you do stuff, you don't realize it till later. And say, hey, that's pretty cool. So just a list of all the innovations that I created in IT, which a lot of my work was in the restaurants and the brain. And so innovation to me, it's not necessarily creation. A lot of people think about it being creation. It's actually adaptation. So
Mm,
and that goes into something we call pattern recognition. So if you see something that's working in one area, if you can adapt it to even a completely different, like for me, it was what I was doing in restaurants and getting lost to the brain. That's real innovation because you have something that works in one area and you recognize the patterns of where you are in another area, and you can apply those same principles to that. The other thing I want to talk about is what you just said, and that's so important for parents to hear because you said you grew up in the woods. Our kind of basis for what we do really is based on the belief that almost all of our cognitive skills are learned at a young age by modeling from adults and interaction with our environment.
exactly.
And so growing up in the woods is huge. Problem solving is huge. Kids playing with blocks is huge. You see, there's a movement now for parents to get their kids outside, getting muddy, that's how kids learn. One of the biggest tragedies is the introduction of a digital device to children. There's so much danger. Kids get addicted to it. And this was a term that was coined in South Korea several years ago called digital dementia. And they found that kids that grew up on a digital device up before the age of 6, so starting at a very young age, which some kids do,
Ooh,
they're
yeah,
not building those critical foundational cognitive skills that we serve us for the rest of our life. And so in their early 20s, they're already experiencing dementia. And
yeah,
you might have even seen the videos of little kids. I mean, it's so tragic. These little kids, the mom takes the device away and they have a meltdown because they're already addicted. And then on the other hand, just as bad, because remember, modeling from adults, it breaks my heart sometimes to go to a park and there'll be kids playing and mom's looking at her phone. Stupid. What person on Facebook is more important than your child who's on the swing? Mommy, swing me, or mommy, look at me, look at me. And so we're creating these huge relationship divides, cognitive divides that are
yeah,
happening because of those stupid digital devices that, now we use them as adults, we need to use them all the time. But for kids, they need to have a ball, they need to have friends, they need to be outside, they need to be bored. A lot of research now on how important it is to be bored, because when we're bored is when we get creative. If
exactly.
you're filling every minute with something, then the brain doesn't have time to actually do the processing that it really needs to do.
Exactly, exactly. I still love this because I went on date night, and I'm sitting there, I'm an observer, and I'm looking around me, and there's two people clearly on date night, and the two of them are on their phone, and I'm thinking, lack of communication, but what are they modeling? What are they
That's,
modeling
yeah,
to each other, and let alone the children,
right,
so I
right.
can't even imagine what the next generation is going to look like because as a communicator, I've learned and I've observed so many people don't know how to communicate anymore because they're so, as you said, so dependent on the electronics. It's so sad
Right.
for me to watch, and I would love to say, so,
I know, it's so sad. And it's interesting. The other night, I realized a practical application of that was I was out to dinner with some friends, I don't know, maybe a month or so or whatever, and the service was absolutely terrible. A couple of young waiters and waitresses, terrible. And I realized when we grew up in a restaurant, we didn't have phone, right? We talked with our parents. with each other. We talked to the waitress. We observed, right? So we observed, and then if we're sitting there waiting for our food, we're observing things. And then, and when I was in the restaurant business, that was huge because you had to be able to relate. You had to be able to understand what's happening. Nowadays, I think kids grow up on a phone, and because parents here keep yourself busy with this phone in a restaurant, and now they have no idea how to be a good server, right? Because it was never modeled to them.
It wasn't modeled exactly.
They're
Yeah.
just sitting over in the corner by the bar on their phone, right? And you can be waving whatever you want, and they're not going to come over.
Exactly. Years ago, the truth be told, when was going through my divorce, I was so the victim. And I was so, oh my God, the sky is falling and life is, and I had 3 young children. And it wasn't until my former husband threatened to take me to court to take the children away, because it was cheap, I believe, cheaper for him than paying child support. And
Uh,
uh, and I went, all of a sudden something clicked in my brain, and I went over my dead body, and I dove into communication courses because I stopped and I paused and I thought, what am I modeling to my children? Victim,
yeah, good.
the the wallflower, all of that, woe is me kind of stuff. And I thought, no, I'm their first teacher. I'm there for, what am I doing here? And it was like an instantaneous shift. And I'm so grateful for that experience, because now, what can I always say to myself, what can I build with this? And my brain
Yeah,
went into in mode. I'm always thinking a million miles ahead of myself, which has its pros and cons.
yeah,
But as a result of it, my children now have better communication skills because I was able to model it from
right.
that point. And granted, it was after their impressive ages, but it still worked to a degree. So I'm very grateful for that. Everything is an experience.
Yes,
And I
yeah,
always ask, what can I build with this? What can I do with this?
right, right, right. No,
Yeah.
that's great. And one of the things I enjoy, so we work with, you just mentioned children. So a lot of times we actually work with families, which is a lot of, so the exercises themselves, completely different than anything that's ever been developed, basically. Very simple, symbols on a piece of paper. They were designed that way for the Marines so they could take them into combat with them, fold them, put them in their pockets. But they're very engaging, and Navy SEAL all the way down to a 5-year-old, that they're designed to be that simple. And that was kind of the basis of my consulting, was simplicity.
Yeah.
So a lot of families will do them together. So now they get the modeling, they get the interaction, they get the competitiveness, they get the dopamine release all together. Again, as a family, because that's one of the things that's hard to find. I think for a lot of families, it's just activities to do together.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, wow. Let's take a quick pause because I want to check in with the listening audience. And if you're loving the conversation and if something resonates, pause and reflect.
Uh-huh.
Teach me with your biggest takeaway. I want to know what you're getting out of this, or share the episode with someone who you believe would really want to hear it. Let's create and keep that ripple effect going. Sean, how would you, somebody struggling with something, what would you do with them? Or is it possible to get a sample of what you're doing without obviously giving away, the whole kit caboodle, but something to,
Yeah, we can so it's interesting. The exercises themselves are so simple. It's just, again, symbols on a piece of paper, and it's a derivative. That's the agile approach. It's a derivative of the ones originally created for the Marines, SEALs, snipers, pilots, and now we work with professional athletes, kids. It doesn't really matter because it's the brain that we're trying to change.
right?
And so many people have looked at it and said, "How can this possibly change my brain?" And so I kind of, it's like if someone came to the best bodybuilder in the world and the guy pointed to some dumbbells on the floor, the guy would say, "How on earth can hunks of metal make me stronger?" Well, it's how you use them,
Mhm.
right? You have progressive resistance with those weights. And it's the same thing with this. When we first developed this for the military, I experimented with different types of symbols because I knew I had to have a symbol that would make you make a decision. You had to do a decision, and you have to do it out loud. You have to engage as many parts of your brain as possible. One of the problems with the digital programs like Lumosity and Cogmed and so forth, and they have all this, basically you always get better at a game because you practice it. But there've
Right.
been a lot of neuroscience research put into it that is not really making real world improvements because you're not interfacing with the real world. You're just looking at a little bit of a screen or on TV or something. Um, and so, but the exercises, they're deceptively simple. And what we found with the brain is our brains will do almost anything we ask it to do if it has a way to do that. So
Right.
when you have a very simple decision that you have to make a decision on, a simple decision on, your brain will do whatever it needs to make that happen. And so we have a framework of cognitive skills, again, that are built from the time when we were children. And we all have a different makeup of those. Some are weaker, some are stronger. Some examples of those would be analysis and synthesis, for example, right? So if you can analyze, you can break things down. If you can
Right.
synthesize, now if you're poor at synthesizing, you'll put it back together the way you broke it down. But if you become better at synthesis, you can create something that's different and better and more appropriate for the situation than you would have otherwise. You know,
Right.
categorization is huge. Classifying something. Is it important? Is it not important? And another problem with people on a digital device all the time is everything comes in with the same priority. And so the ability to classify something, do I do it now? Do I do it later? It's my mom calling, do I talk to her or talk to my friends? I mean, all that classification is important. Um, Direction orientation. There's a lot of different underlying cognitive skills, which kind of lead up to something called abstract sequencing. So that's when we have a lot of data coming in at once. How can we sequence that into the most efficient either response, or if someone's talking to us, how can we pull from there just the most relevant data to act on? And that's extremely important for mental efficiency. So all those skills are actually used just to identify these very simple symbols, and then they get harder and harder and harder. And the thing that amazes me is in the course of just one page of symbols, you can actually observe people. They start out consciously, and then very quickly you go into the unconscious, which is flow state, which is where we want it to be. And then they'll fall in and out of it, but then as they practice, it gets better and better and better, and their processing speed gets faster, which is
Yeah.
really the key to our performance. And one of our neuroscientists says what we're actually doing is optimizing system one and system two thinking to get into flow. So some of your listeners may be aware of Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And so system one thinking is fast and unconscious, and system two is slow and conscious. And so when they become optimized, I actually have a different take on it than Kahneman did, but it's a good model to use. Then you're thinking without thinking, and that's what we start to create.
Love that.
And
Taking credit on that one.
yeah, I know it's good book, good book. And then because your brain works harder, again, we're using that type of stimulation that changes your brain immediately. So it amazes me that, I mean, really, I've been doing this now since 2007, so probably well over 12,000 people, and I have an amazing director of training, Tim Stewart, who also works with a lot of people. And it always amazes us how our speed of processing, which is the critical factor to our performance. If you're a high performer, like a professional athlete or a business leader, if you can process a little bit faster, it gives you an edge. But one of the symptoms of almost any debilitation, autism, ADHD, strokes, dementia, is slow processing. And
Right.
so we've mapped out, and we can see a direct correlation between faster processing and performance, real world performance. And we have people that have improved their processing speed 10, 20, 30% in 45 minutes with real lasting improvements in their life. And it always blows me away because typically we work with people because they have a certain problem they want to solve.
Uh-huh.
I think one of my favorite examples is a financial analyst who just got promoted. He was overwhelmed at work. And I worked with him on a Friday, and I expected to hear from him the next week that work was going better, which I did. But what really surprised me was on Monday morning, he emailed me and said, "John, you're not going to believe this. I ran through your exercises," because we always give the exercises to our clients so they can practice on their own, and only 5 minutes a day or so. He said, "I did them Saturday morning. I got more done around the house. without by noon than normally I would all weekend. And my wife now says that when she's talking to me, I'm focused on her. You already made my home life great. I can't wait to get to work.
Okay.
So those are benefits we didn't expect,
Love it.
right? Because his brain was faster and his focus was better, all parts of his life started to improve.
I love that. And actually, you're answering all the questions. I actually was typing while
Oh,
you
that's good. Sorry.
and I'm like, okay, what about ADHD and
Yeah,
autism and
yeah.
such? So yeah, wow. We're thinking fast.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're
Uh,
sinking here, and to me again, I mean, we have so much. Tim the other day was telling me about a woman with it's called sundowners disease. It's like a type of dementia that happens when the sun goes down.
Okay.
In like 3 sessions, that's almost gone away. We have people with strokes who their memory is coming back. It's just amazing how our brains rewire around damage to do what we need it to do, and it does that very quickly.
I
Um,
love it.
and ADHD is something a lot of especially kids struggle with, and a lot of the reasons kids do is because they're on a digital device, right? They can't control, and their attention goes from one to another. And most of the ADHD kids we work with are actually very bright. They just can't control their attention. And so one of my favorites was a young boy, he's 10 years old, and his initial measure of the speed of processing was one of the slowest I ever worked with. By the third session, he had cut it from over 3 minutes down to a minute. So he cut whatever that is, two-thirds, it's a third, what's that, 3 times as fast? I had to do my math. And he got his first day in school. And then 4 weeks later, he got Student of the Month. And his grandmother said he was sitting down and reading a book with her. And, so his entire trajectory of his life has changed. Um, and he did it with his father. So the two of them had something fun to do together. And so it's just, it's a lot of times it's kind of like putting a faster processor in your computer. Everything works better. It doesn't matter if it's an old computer, new computer, what software you're running. With the new processor, it goes faster. The other thing too that's interesting, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. You're going to get so excited about this. Is it's not psychology based. A lot of people think it's psycho. It's not. Psychology is excellent. There's so many good programs, but psychology deals with the mind, right? How you think about it. And it can take a while. It can be very effective, but it can take a while to have those benefits because you have to repeat them. Again, neuroplasticity
Right.
helps you. And so what I do really complements any psychology programs and helps us get results faster, but it really operates in a different part of the brain.
I love that. So is it safe to assert when you have your own struggles, you default to your training as well? Because I know as human beings, I mean, I've been doing this for years as well, and every now and then it's like, oh, that
Well,
overwhelm runs in, and I'm like, and then I get in my head rather than back in my heart, and it's like, breathe, Karen, you know this stuff, like
no,
what with yours?
and that is an excellent question. The old saying, those who can't do teach, right? And I love doing it. A lot of times when I do it with my clients, I do it along with them.
Yeah.
Like they don't hear me, but I do it because, but I have them on the walls and I remember. So I still do them. Been doing it now for all these years, but if I have a meeting coming up or like for an interview or something, I always run through it. If I have a lot of work to get done, I'll run through a couple of them as well. Because the neuroscientists say that the changes are permanent. So it's amazing. I've met with people. I had some Marines reach out to me. I think I worked with them maybe 10 years ago, wanted more of the exercises. And so for fun, I gave him a session and we kind of time, and his speed of processing was pretty close to what it was before, 10 years before. He shared with me how it helped him so much emotionally. He lost both his parents, he lost his business, and it really, really helped him stay on track emotionally. But it's also, even though we've already done it and the changes are permanent, it's always as good as a kind of quick mental boost, refocus, kind of speed up. And so that's where now I'm at. So I'll run through it just maybe a couple of minutes, a couple of times, different difficulties, different patterns to help me But yes, it's easy when we teach something not to do it ourselves. So I have to remember to do that for sure.
I have to remind myself for sure, because as a former people pleaser, also it's like always putting people first. It's like I gotta,
Yeah,
me too, because I'm important, and I've learned to love myself. It's taken years, but I've learned to do that, and I have to remind myself to
yeah.
take that breath, that pause break, and say, okay, you have this knowledge, where can I apply it, kind of thing. So as I'm listening to you, it brings up the question for me, how would this be, if at all, in the world of manifestation? Is that something that could be applied per se to manifesting, now that your brain is aligning and you're quicker speeding it? I would assert that there would be some level of application there.
And that's an excellent question because I'm still learning about that myself. So a mutual friend of Tony's and mine, Harrison Klein, is really into manifestation, and actually he just certified some people in his program, and they got certified in my program because I certify people, and they're combining them. I'm really excited to see how that happens because I think where it benefits is my program will help you get into flow. So it's when you're in flow and everything's happening, you don't have time for negative thoughts.
Right,
And one of the foundational principles of my program is you don't stop for mistakes. So many people, they get held back because they don't believe they can do something.
right,
One woman started crying when I told her that. She goes, "My whole life I was told to be perfect," and so that was creating anxiety, and it was impacting her self belief that she could get something done.
right.
So we also started experimenting with inserting some actual phrases into the exercises because when you get into flow,
Mhm.
we're training your brain to anticipate that something is coming. So that's part of intuition, cognitive mind anticipation.
Right,
If you can anticipate a situation and put yourself in that, something positive. I've been working with a young man for years, and he really struggled with his anger. And and so what we do is at the end of the row, we would say, just think first. And because he's now getting his brain into that flow, it's priming itself to think first before he reacts. His anger's gone away like completely. He's getting along much better with his parents. And so what I want to do is work with someone like Harrison and find out, what key phrases that are so impactful to us can we integrate into the exercises to maybe help with that. So that's an excellent question, and I'm just trying to learn about that now, how we can integrate the two to
right.
help people.
Yeah, it really makes sense to my brain as I'm sitting here thinking, because my brain, again, as a creative, it's like, oh, if you do this, you get to, maybe put these puzzle pieces together, and then that's the way. So that
Yeah,
might be a conversation for you and I to have later, but
yeah, I'd love to. Yeah,
yeah, 'cause I love thinking in terms of that, especially in the world of, I believe we are manifestors. And what we think about, we bring about. Everything is
yeah,
energy. So,
right,
where do you apply the energy, and at what frequency? Especially if you're training the brain in such a way to create the patterns, there's got to be a way of
right.
thing. But that's the way my brain works. So
Yeah,
what
no,
was
I'd love to talk to you about that offline. Maybe
yeah,
there's some ways we can just integrate the two.
I
That,
think it would be fun. I think, like, I'm getting my God bumps when I come out. So I always know when I'm on the right track, because it's like, whoo, yeah, I get those. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I've been getting those, and I've always been interested in the way the brain works in human nature as
yeah.
well, which has been the foundation of all the work that I'm doing. And so I'm fascinated with what you're doing. I'm curious, John, what was the one thing that, before all this came to fruition, what was the one thing that awakened your potential to move forward?
Interesting. I think, well, at a young age, my dad kind of gave us this, belief that we could do anything we wanted to if we put our mind to it, and really, and obviously the ups and downs, every all the ups and downs in our lives. But I think that belief has been very helpful. And I think especially so many of the problems, like even this one that I solved, I had no idea I was going to be able to do it before I started. I mean, we're talking about even in the business world, things that were way out of control that I was able to bring back together to be successful. And if I didn't have that belief that I could do it, I almost kind of like to be in that situation where if I failed, I was in trouble. As a consultant early on, if you fail, you get fired. Which was kind of even the same situation with this. When I first developed this for the Marine Corps, we had to do a full DoD experiment. And that actually really changed my life because it was a full experiment. So overseen by all these psychologists and everything. And we had a platoon is about 40 guys. A battalion is 1,000. So we had a randomly chosen platoon as a control group. And then we had the pilot group, the test group that I would work with. And I could have probably chosen any platoon in the battalion, but I chose the worst one. I thought I want a real challenge and if I can help these guys at all. So they lost 16 guys the cycle before from IEDs and a helicopter crash, 3 attempted suicides. They were in trouble every weekend, failing their pre-deployment objectives. And so I had only 3 months to try to make a difference. So I got in there, I had 3 months, and obviously if it didn't work, I get fired, right? But I embedded with these Marines for 3 months. It was the most probably rewarding experience in my life. All these young Marines, and when you're out on in the desert for 3 weeks with no hot water, you really bond with these guys, and they were the most amazing guys I've ever spent time with. And during that time is when I developed the exercises, the basic of the exercise, experimented and so forth. But I just had this belief that I could make a difference. And I did. So 3 months later, not only were they now the best performing platoon in the battalion, but when they went through their final pre-deployment training, one of the best ever, the instructor said. And so from then it kind of spread throughout the Marine Corps. Again, I mentioned SEALs, pilots, and everyone was a new challenge because they're in different environments, but that core part of the program was the same. And so that was probably, if my dad hadn't given me that belief, we wouldn't be here because I never would have taken that on.
I don't want to skip over that and I think that's brilliant because belief, right? And I would
Right.
spiritual context, the lie belief is in the belief, the word belief, right? And if you believe that it's not true, then it's not going to be true. What you focus on expands, right? But I love what you said, believing that I can make a difference, right? So for the listening audience, if they believe they can make a difference, anything is possible.
Right.
You focus
Right.
on expands. So that's awesome. I just got so I know you have a gift for the listening audience as well, and all of your contact information is going to be in the show notes for sure. So I'll make sure everybody gets that and a way of getting in touch with you. But tell us about your gift, the link will also.
So it's interesting. So, I work a lot with business people, and as I've discussed, studied more about what controls our behavior, and almost everybody can relate to this. It's our habits. Our habits are what hold us back, it's what make us successful. And so there's a lot of wonderful books out there about habits, but they're about books. And my consulting approach was always, just keep it simple and make it happen. And so using the same approach to changing the brain, I've applied to habits. So I have a method, and I've helped so many of my clients with this, to change any habit in 30 minutes or less, not 30 days or 6 weeks or whatever else they say. And it's a way of using the field I created, applied neuroplasticity, to your habits as well as your brain performance. So we have a book. It's called The Hack Your Habits in 30 minutes. Sorry, Hack Your Habits in 30 minutes. It's free, so that's definitely a giveaway for people, and I hope that they will do it. Now, the interesting thing about it is it's simple. It's one of the shortest books I've ever seen, but the principles in there, if they follow them, I guarantee that they will change the bad habits in their life or take on new good habits of their life in 30 minutes or less.
Love that, love that. What's the one message, John, of hope that you really want to get out there and give people, especially the listening audience, and hopefully they will share this, and because this is, I believe, is something that really it's not a need, but it's more it would serve so many people on so many different levels. And I
Right.
myself will be promoting this as well because I love what you're up to. So what is that one message of hope?
I think that message is hope. So, so one of the most rewarding parts of this is so many people have come to us with problems that, they've been holding them back, relationship problems, mental problems a lot, where the traditional, medical community can't help them. And they get hope. So I think this may be a message of encouragement to people that no matter where they are struggling, there is hope and they can get better. They can actually get better. We created kind of a fun activity. So if your listeners want to try this sometime, if they go to ChatGPT, let's open up a ChatGPT window, and they type in, how can combat brain training by John Kennedy help blank? And then put in whatever they want in there. And because there's so much data out there and what I've done, and people have come back with the most amazing things. ChatGPT will tell you how we can help you, which will give you some hope. Now, what you don't want to do is do the next, it'll ask you, do you want to know how to do that? You don't want to go there because it'll give you something else. It's not me.
Right.
But that first thing, people have said it's really given them some encouragement that, wow, so if I improve my brain, I can really help this part of my life. So that's the main message of hope, is that we can help people and they can help themselves in so many ways, which kind of ties into what you do as well, right? That whole manifestation piece. I mean, there is hope for
There is
people.
always hope. There's always hope. I believe when we let go of the hope, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
It's the glue. It's the glue, for me at least. So before we end, Sean, and this, I can go on and on with you because I just
Yeah, this is great. We'll have to talk some more.
conversation, right? We'll just have to have you back. That's all. What would you like to leave the audience with? I call it pearls of wisdom, whatever you want to call it. But what is that thing you'd really, really like to leave the listening audience today?
I think just having them understand that neuroplasticity is real. And whatever they do or do with their kids or whatever else, if they are aware, it's almost like opening your eyes, things are happening and they get frustrated or different things. But if you can step back and say, wait a minute, this is happening because I'm repeating it, right? This is what's happening with my kids because this is what I'm letting happen to them.
Mm.
And then with that awareness, then they can start to make the changes, right? So I think that the fact that we have this amazing power that we give up, right? We have the power to change if we understand how neuroplasticity works, because everything we do flows through our brain.
Beautiful. Sean, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and journey with us today. Your story is a powerful reminder that transformation happens when we lean into the awareness and take those badassy steps to
That's
empower
right.
our lives, right? You could be a man and still be badassy, right? So you got to create a niche. Well, yeah, I don't believe in like segregation. So,
Right.
this kind of stuff applies for everybody. It could be
Yeah.
used.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Karen. This is great. It's like hanging out, like we're hanging out in Las Vegas, just having a great conversation. This
I
is great.
know,
We'll
right?
have some more for sure. For
Excellent.
sure.
I'm bringing more water with me though, because in Vegas.
Yeah.
To our listening audience, remember the bridge from ordinary to extraordinary is built with small steps of change and big leaps of faith. uh, you're more powerful than you realize. So keep showing up, keep stepping forward, and keep awakening your potential. If today's episode sparked something within yourself, let's do a deeper dive. DM me or reach out to John. As I said, his information will be in the show notes. DM me the word awaken and visit our website at www.tranquilsolutions.com to book your clarity call and explore what's next in your path. John, what is your website? Real quick. I know it's going to be in the show notes, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. It's combatbraintraining.com.
Awesome.
So, and we're all in combat of some form or another. It was developed for guys in real combat, and
I
that's what we're
love it.
training. Combat brain training. Don't forget the brain, though. Some people put combat training. I don't teach people how to fight. It's just combat brain training.
I'm glad you clarified that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. This is awesome. Thank you
Uh,
so much.
You're so
Bye-bye.